Hey YouTube, it is me, Turkish Delight, and it has been a while. Unfortunately, I've not been making videos given the fact that I am getting a move on with my life and applying for jobs and other boring adult activities that you guys don't need to worry about. But I've been called to action given the current pandemic that we are facing. No, not COVID, not the bubonic plague, not even the Spanish flu, which itself also originated from China, I believe. We are talking about a pandemic of Dilos. A lot of people have decided recently that they wish to play Dilo and are now spamming the game with Dilos. This is much the same in which we spam the game with Cerados. And much like how Cerado is a dinosaur that is overtuned, even though its defenders will say no otherwise, they believe that the corpse bully scavenger is actually the apex hunter of the current ecosystem of the game. Even as a Dilo fanboy myself, I can admit that Dilo does have problems, and so I decided to set apart making a rework that, in my opinion, should fix Dilo. And if you do not believe that it does fix Dilo, please leave your suggestions down below. Open communication in this community is a very, very important thing, and together we can produce better results than one person can. I'm not going to say that this rework will fix Dilo 100%. I'm not going to say that it does not have its problems or even potential problems. But I do believe that it at least solves the issues that Dilo has and presents something different and unique that I hope people would like and may even spur the devs to do themselves with your community feedback in general balance feedback. So, let's begin at the very, very start. Why do I love Dilo? Now, I like the Dilo because it's just a cool, sneaky dinosaur. I like the feeling that I can play this creature and be the sneaky, scary little guy who comes at you at nighttime and is able to confuse you with these hallucinations and make you panic and get scared. I love the fact that I can be hunting someone and see them just randomly start alt-attacking hallucinations. I can't see the hallucinations. Maybe that's something that I change in this rework. You'll have to find out. But I love the fact that I can see them panic. I like the fact that there are lots of openings available to me due to the hallucinations. While a lot of people will go on and say, well, the Dilo is just so easy and skillless, I believe that you can actually find a level of skill expression in Dilo. Knowing when to use your hallucinations and try and work with where you believe the hallucinations will be attacking from in order to catch your opponent off guard is a very, very interesting thing. And I really, really like that aspect of Dilo. I feel like there's a lot of parts of Dilo's identity that can be expanded upon and even improved to make the player experience for both sides more enjoyable. But now that I said why I like the creature, we can now go on to why people don't like the creature. So what are the actual issues that Dilo has? Now, as a preface, the issue about Dilo that I will not be addressing is, well, I don't like the fact that hallucinations do damage, and I don't like the fact that the hallucinations exist and that they can attack me. I think this is skillless. I am not going to accept that as an actual issue. The reason why is because the conversation of skill in the Isle is so convoluted and such a mess that it makes absolutely no sense. You can talk to a raptor player, and they will describe skill to you as movement and baiting people and going in for attacks. And then you ask them, cool, so how does a dinosaur like Dibble match your level of skill? To which they will say, it fucking doesn't. Because it can't, because that level of skill exists only for raptor. If you ask a dino player what skill is, they will say, oh well, skill is understanding the play of the ambush. The skill is learning when to be patient, when not to be patient, where to be patient, where to go on the map, how to potentially catch people off guard. If you see a group of Pakis and a group of Mayas, maybe you let the Pakis cross the river safely and instead go for the Maya. Even in the simple act of patience, there is skill to be found. For if you are working on something and improving at something, are you not gaining a skill? So, we're going to ignore that criticism of Dilo, because frankly, this is how the devs want Dilo to be. I'm not going to create a different dinosaur. I'm instead going to try and solve the issues with what they have created, and what we as a community have also created. We are not blameless in this. In a weird way, we asked for this during the initial rework of Dilo, but we'll get to that. First of all, Dilo attacks during the day, right? Dilo is advertised as a nighttime hunter, and yet we see it en masse during daytime, just hallucinating people and causing the hallucinations to do damage, because they are able to. This is an issue that a lot of people have with the playable. They don't like the fact that it can go out at daytime and attack people and use its venom, especially as I said, it is advertised as a nighttime hunter. The Dilo hallucinations also do not have many mechanics to play against them. In fact, the mechanics to play against them currently are mainly bugs and exploits in their AI. In the past, we did have mechanics to play against hallucinations. You could run up to the hallucinations where they first were summoned and remove them before the Dilo had a chance to allow them to attack you. This was removed, probably because it was too difficult for the Dilos to actually damage things and kill things, which may sound like a complete oxymoron. Like, oh, how could Dilo struggle to kill things when it's so overpowered? Well, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised that if a dinosaur that is fast enough is able to completely destroy all of your hallucinations, your only option is to attack them yourself, and offer yourself up to be attacked. This actually ruins the gameplay of Dilo and does not lead into what it is meant to be. However, not being able to counter hallucinations can cause a feeling of an unwinnable fight. It makes the player being attacked by the Dilo feel like there isn't something that they can do to try to survive. And even in fighting the Dilo, it doesn't really offer that much engaging gameplay. We can solve this. Dilo interactivity during a hunt is low. So, the community originally, this is jumping a few steps, when Dilo first released, the venom timer was 5 minutes. This was changed to 1 minute. When you bite a playable, you inflict this timer of 1 minute, and you can summon hallucinations during that minute. Once that minute runs out, or before it runs out, if you bite them again, it resets that timer. The full venom timer is 5 minutes. So therefore you can do this process 5 times. Before the venom is gone, then you need to reapply it. This, however, is still an issue, because dealing with the Dilo every minute is very, very different from dealing with the Raptor constantly. However, we also see in criticisms of dinosaur-like Raptor that people also don't like the fact that Raptor is just unable to be hit and can just dance around you. This is what I mean by the argument of skill doesn't really matter. People are going to find things annoying regardless, but what we can do is try to solve the issues that the vast majority of the community disagree with, and try to solve them to produce something better. Look at that, more pages. So Dilo hallucinations do not have unique factors or spawn types. What this basically refers to is the fact that if you are in water, a Dilo hallucination is spawned on top of you, and then sinks down to the bottom of the water. If you're in a mud pool, a Dilo hallucination spawns at the bottom of the mud pool and runs towards you before trying to reach up and hit you. If you are on a rock, the Dilo hallucination will spawn on the rock. Sometimes, however, the Dilo hallucination just doesn't bloody spawn, which can cause annoyance for the Dilo. So this is an issue that plagues both the Dilo player and the actual target of the attack. We then have Dilo hallucinations damage being very, very front-loaded. This is something that I never really heard anyone else really talk about, but Dilo has an issue where its main damage is right at the start of the ambush. You immediately start with 3 hallucinations. So anything that can be solved to try to offset that front-loaded damage, and instead encourage the Dilo to spread out its damage, or even adding counterplay to the Dilo front-loading its damage, would be appreciated by the community. At least I hope so. Another point is that the Dilo's hitbox is very, very wonky. And the solution to this, at least in my opinion, seemed to be increasing its bite speed. It seemed to be that Dilo has a fast bite speed to make up for the fact that its hitbox is wonky. I'm not saying this is the reason why. Of course, the game is far more complicated than we can ever imagine, so therefore I do not know whether or not this is the issue, and I will not claim that I do know the issue. This is my hypothesis. My hypothesis is that because Dilo can actually bite a target right beneath it, and not land a single bite, they decided to make the bite go faster, so it has more chances to land bites. This can still cause issues where you can do a run-in as a Dilo, and not land a single hit, even though you were aiming for the head and landed the bite on the head. Inversely, this can cause a lot of annoyance for the target of the fight, for the Dilo just bursts out from its hiding place, bites you a whole load of times, fully envenoms you, and then just starts blasting you with clones. Or hallucinations, that we're going to be calling them throughout the video. I don't like the word clones, it feels tacky. We now have the fact that the Dilo has passive hallucinations, which can catch players off guard. These hallucinations don't actually seem to favour the same rule of 1 minute. They seem to be able to spawn even after the Dilo is dead. These are an issue, because the Dilo has no control of these hallucinations, which I believe to be a problem. Some Dilo players may be like, oh, I like the passive hallucinations because it adds a little bit of damage, and you are correct. I don't like them because I don't know when they're summoned, and I don't know how to play around them in order to get more hits off. If that makes sense. It also makes the target more annoyed with the Dilo, because a target could be resting after escaping a Dilo, even after killing the Dilo, as I've had cases like this before where I've killed a Dilo, and then while healing, I just died to a passive hallucination. Well, funny the first time, and second time it gets a little bit annoying, no? The Dilo has a high speed tier. The Dilo is one of the fastest playables in the game. This can be an issue, because people feel like they cannot escape the Dilo, but it is also integral to the Dilo's personality and its playstyle, given the fact that it is designed about running in and running out. It is not trying to bamboozle you like a raptor does, by moving around you and using its agility. It doesn't really have that agility. Some people in the past have said that, well, maybe we should fix Dilo's agility and make the hallucinations weaker, to which I would like to refer to Maiasaura. Maya is a dinosaur that had a really fun playstyle of running at you. The devs then decided to buff the quad stance, which in my opinion was needed. I believe that the cooldown on the quad stance was a reasonable buff. The issue is, the cooldown is now very fast, and what we now have is another dinosaur that can just camp versus you and hit you with omnidirectional attacks. This has now led to quite a lot of people now saying that Maya is simply too strong. Even though people originally wanted Maya to be buffed in the quad stance, they now don't want that. This is what I mean by making Dilo more into a dinosaur like Raptor is going to cause more issues, because people already dislike dinosaurs like Raptor. You may say this is because of the pounce mechanics, but I've heard plenty of people complain about the general agility of Raptor and even dinosaurs like Troodon. So now we have the fact that Dilo clone summoning or hallucination summoning, I hate the fact that just says clone, I can't be bothered to change this now, is too fast for certain playables to deal with. What this means is that a dinosaur like a Carno can run up to the hallucinations when they could be removed by running into them or even attacking them, but a dinosaur like Trike or Stego is simply unable to do so. But these dinosaurs also have the health to tank the attacks, and can even actually outlast the Dilo Venom by making it too much of a threat for the Dilo to reapply the Venom's latest effect on them. So there is a lot of ambiguity with this statement here, but it is still a problem nonetheless. And if we were to design a rework that makes Dilo more fun, this issue here would have to be addressed in one way or another. So now we have the most pressing matter here. Instead of just doing what a lot of people do and jumping into a rework, when I decided to talk about a Carno rework, I first wanted to look into what the devs actually intended for the dinosaur. The devs are less likely to take a rework on board that simply fundamentally changes the mechanics of the dinosaur. Instead, they are more likely to take a rework on board that takes the existing template and either adds or changes something to that. The devs only have a limited amount of time to really go back and change things. This is understandable. Everything in the game may as well be some sort of placeholder. We don't know for sure, but it may as well be. In that, everything in the game is the initial conception of the idea, and things are changed and evolved until we get to the final form of that. Saying placeholder, in my opinion, is not meant to be an insult towards the devs. It is instead a compliment to the devs, because it means that we have a template of which to build up more ideas. Talking of templates, we have the concept art for Dilo, which shows us a lot of very interesting things, and is in my opinion a very nice concept art. I remember when I first saw this, I was very hyped for the Dilo, and there was a lot of speculation as to what its ability would be, given the fact that we knew that it was Venom based, and we knew that it had something to do with hallucinations, either auditory or visual. We see here a Dilo going in and getting a nip on a Stego before leaving, and the Stego being plagued by hallucinations. We do not see the Dilo killing the Stego. It is being said by the devs they do not want Dilo to be a dinosaur that punches up majorly, meaning that in my opinion, taking that information, I would believe that Dilo's targets that it wants to hunt would be between the small tier range and the early mid tier range. So we're talking a size range from Beppy, I guess, if you were to say so, or let's say Raptor for example, all the way to something like a large subadult Aloe or Maya. So we're hitting that 2 to 2.4 ton sort of range dinosaur where it could reasonably punch up to. We also see the Dilo with its young. We see a Dilo hiding in a little cave. We also see a Dilo trying to either defend a corpse from a Carno, likely during daytime, or trying to steal a corpse from a Dilo. But we also see that it does not have hallucinations on the Carno. The Carno is instead being bitten on the tail and the legs. We also see them eating a Tenno, likely alive. So what is the Dilo meant to be from this concept art? But the concept art shows a dinosaur that wants to ambush people and cause hallucinations. We see that the Dilo has an interesting relationship with cooling. We even have a specific panel showing the dinosaur doing a cool. We also have the fact that Dilo is shown resting in a cave, likely during daytime, showing that it likely wants to hide during the day and come out during the night. We also say that dinos can group up to get food away from a dinosaur like a Carno. Granted that we are talking about a 2.8 ton Carno back then. So more than likely, 2.8 ton Carno was equivalent to a full raptor pack, a full dino pack of 4 during the day. This is very, very interesting information. Now we have what the devs wanted Dilo to be. We have here different quotes from the devs during dev blogs. They mainly talk about the Dilo's calls. We have imagery of Aztec death whistles. We have the fact that the dinosaur is a terrifying or horrifying prowess. We know that it will have a fog effect. We know that temporary Dino AI to spawn and run towards the target before disappearing. This is an early idea. Potentially the hallucinations weren't meant to damage the targets, but this was changed. We have the idea of that Dilo was meant to bring much needed horror into the game. The idea that it is effective at nighttime with very numerous ways to witness a player swinging away at a target that isn't there. We have the idea that venom is something that you're going to want to avoid, and that it has a unique threatening call for envenomation that can be heard before a hallucination initiates an attack. Keep an eye on this point, because it may be relevant later. Spoilers. So as we see here, we have the fact that the devs pay a lot of attention towards the sound. The vocalizations of Dilo is very, very important. The Dino is an experience for the player. It is something that you want to avoid. It's meant to be something that you are scared of. While traveling around at nighttime, you don't want to run into a Dilo. If you are within the size range of dinosaurs that can be hunted by it, or even if you're above that size range, if you are a full adult Maya, for example, a whole pack of Dilos could be something terrifying to you. Something that you don't even want to go into because potentially you could die. We also know the fact that in these dev blogs, while the dev blogs at the top and the dev blogs are at the bottom are about a month or 2 apart, we do see the fact that the devs had decided that the hallucinations would actually damage you. We also see the fact that the hallucinations were originally intended to attack based on the Dilo calling. We see this once again, this relationship that Dilo has with noise and expression. The idea that it invokes the sound of the Aztec death whistle. It's supposed to intimidate you through its calls. Now we have a bit of a schizo theory moment, right? Where one of this concept art I show here is not showing a Dilo calling, as the other Dilo doesn't have its mouth open to call, but instead is a Dilo calling to get its hallucination to go after it, and the hallucination makes the noise of the call as well. This is reaching a lot, but it's an interesting idea, and also sparks some of the ideas in this rework. As I said, pay attention to this idea, because it may be a spoiler for later on. I could also just be messing around with you, and it's completely inconsequential, and I'm just trying to get you to retain information, just to challenge you to see if you can actually retain information. You could say it's some sort of litmus test to see whether or not you can actually go through this video. We also see the fact that obviously Dilo going after Carno, I assume during daytime, as I said, it is either defending its kill versus Carno, or trying to take away the Carno's kill. We see the fact that Dilo potentially could have had a scavenger niche during the daytime, and worked as a group to get rid of the corpses of other dinosaurs. This would add an interesting relationship to the ecosystem, because if the Dilos fail a kill during nighttime, and they are nighttime hunters, they would need a way to get food during daytime, especially if the devs didn't intend AI to be the way it is now and be as numerous as it potentially can be. We have more dev comments. There's going to be a lot of them. We have the idea that Dilo is supposed to heighten the tension and sonically isolate the envenomated player from the soundscape of the island. We have the idea that ambience is a very, very important part, and they split it up into layers. The idea that the Dilo can make you feel claustrophobic as you reach stage 3. We have the idea that the ambience is supposed to come along with this spooky atmosphere. It can confuse the victim and ramp up the tension. We have the fact that Kissin believes that Dilo at the time was a very iconic dinosaur to do the team. They also mentioned the fact that they do have the right to change anything with the Dilo. But, very, very importantly here, they say that the Dilo's sounds are one of those things that will remain preserved. It also talks about eating players alive, but we will get onto that later. But once again, we see here that Dilo has this almost marital relationship with sound. It is a dinosaur about sound, and this is something that is sorely lacking in its current iteration. Sound doesn't matter. Yes, it cools when it summons a hallucination. Yes, the hallucination's 3 cool, but this isn't enough. I wanted something to do with noise. After reading all of this, I had this idea of a dinosaur that would make calls and confuse you and send in these hallucinations to attack you. That it would almost command its hallucinations like some sort of lieutenant. That it has this, it's a solo dinosaur, but it has a small army at its disposal. And it is up to it to cause enough pressure for it to slowly kill you with this, and it's up to you to understand the micro elements of the gameplay, but also the macro elements of the gameplay with Dilo. It had a lot of potential for this dinosaur to be very, very interesting, and unfortunately, this sort of missed the mark. Now, we got something far simpler, but due to changes, has become more of a detriment to the Dilo rather than a resounding success. We have the idea that the concept art of eating something alive and the fact that we have ideas of Rex having kill animations could imply that when a dinosaur dies, they of course die like normal, but the body of the dinosaur keeps playing animations as if it was alive. This is a very, very interesting thing. It really does lean into the horror of the game. Something very, very important in Dilo's identity is this horror. We have more talks from our queen, Kissing Kitten. Everything in the world is obviously a part of Kissing Kitten's grand design. The tapestry of our lives are just a single thread in the puzzle that she has created for us to unwind, and so unwind we shall. They say that Venom as an introduction to the ecosystem with a large and capable dinosaur such as Dilo would have far greater impacts on it than Troodos, hence why Troodos was announced and released before Dilo. We also had the fact that the player base has an influence on the ecosystem of the game. Whether or not Kissing Kitten means that we have an influence on how the ecosystem is developed, or whether or not she means that we have an influence on how the ecosystem plays out internally, as in our own decisions while playing the game, is neither here nor there. I personally take the second approach to this. While the first one is obviously clear, I believe that as she's talking about the impacts of the ecosystem of a dinosaur being able to apply venom and be very strong at nighttime, I believe what she's saying is that we have the tools to both make this Dilo very, very strong with our own decisions, or even hamper and make and exploit its weaknesses ourselves to make it less of a threat. We also have the fact that Dilo has size, strength, and venom on its size, which somewhat contrasts with the idea of Dilo being described by Dondi, the God Emperor himself, as a very fragile guy. The humor of Dondi here, however, is fun. It hit its ceiling of speed plus mutation, making a dinosaur look ridiculous. I quite like this, like the fact that Dondi is able to even poke fun of his own creations and actually explain why they were different. I quite like this about Dondi. Not too glazed, but what can I say? We also have Philippe himself, the programmer. A program that we will not have sexual relations with, as the famous clip went of fuck the developers. I ensure you guys not to fuck the developers. They have a lot on their plate already. But if the offer is standing, of course. Dinos are very fast, but not so heavy or strong. So this is once again another contrasting thing. Is Dilo a fast dinosaur? A slow dinosaur? Is it fragile? Does it have size on its side? Is it strong? Is it not strong? So we'll have to see how this develops. We have a very contrasting idea here. Can we get to the bottom of it? Perhaps. So Dilo and its variant venom mechanic is noted to have a greater impact on the ecosystem and what can be done with it. This is true. We've seen this as well. We also have the idea that Dilo can influence the macro gameplay of the Isle. Some of you may be confused with what I mean by macro and micro gameplay. Well, micro of course means small. Small decisions are the decisions that a lot of people attribute to skill in this game. A Raptor player, Serrado player, any player of the game will attribute skill as the macro to decision making. Do I fake left? Do I fake right? Do I bait an attack? Do I go in? Do I be greedy? Do I play around someone's power and do this and do that? Macro decisions in this game are often overlooked. A lot of people do not care for the macro gameplay. I think the macro gameplay is one of the most important strengths of the Isle. I believe that Legacy had a lot of macro gameplay and actually led to it having a certain feeling that is lost in Arima. I feel like the community may one day realize that this is what is missing. The macro gameplay is dinosaurs like Dilo, and more importantly, dinosaurs like Dino and Carno. Carno, of course, is the bane of the plains. The macro gameplay of Carno is, if you are a small game, if you need to go into the plains, you'd better stay vigilant, as there is a terror in the plains that could hunt you. Dino is this water creature that can ambush you with lethal efficiency and drown you. A very, very efficient time to kill, may I add. So therefore, drinking in certain areas could become a huge risk. You therefore make different decisions on a macro level against these dinosaurs. You could choose to keep your water up for most of the time and take every opportunity to drink at water spots, even if your water is 70-80%, just so that you don't end up in a situation where you need to drink somewhere where it is more likely for a dino to be. This is the same with Dilo. As a dinosaur that is intended to be a nighttime hunter, the macro decision is whether or not you take the risk of exploring at nighttime, and whether or not you believe the risk of a Dilo is enough for you to be dissuaded from doing this. This is very, very important. This is the horror aspect of the game that people say is missing, or the ambience of the game. We all remember in Legacy the idea of hearing a Rex's thuds in the night, or the feeling of there could be danger at any corner. This is what we are aiming towards here. We have more comments. We have punch packets. Very, very important. Another British person such as myself. We love punch packets here in this house. Very much so. He here confirms that the venom is not going to be a crazy screen effect. And we have the idea of seeing fake Dilos attacking you in-game. We have more things of greater animations and an actual confirmation that eating your victim alive would simply be an animation that the corpse would play, which is very, very interesting. This is something that could be added in the future, perhaps with Rex. With the kill animations, they can easily add this as well. We have the idea that venom could have a variety of effects. And we have the idea that hallucinations would be taking place at night time, whereas the ambience and the fog would be a constant effect of being envenomed, but hallucinations are only at night time. These are very, very important details to make sure that we know. Before we rework the dinosaur, can we at least check if the dinosaur is what it is meant to be in the first place, and how we can create a dinosaur that lives up to the devs' vision. That's what I want, ideally deep down inside. So this is just going over what I said. You guys can read it if you'd like. So now we have a complete summary of what Dilo is meant to be. So Dilo is meant to be a night hunter that uses venom to confuse and disorientate. The hallucinations are used after ambushing and envenomating a target. Those hallucinations deal damage. The Dilo can order the hallucinations to attack using calls. Dilo is a dinosaur that is tied heavily to sound and has a kit that alerts a player using sound cues. Another overlooked thing about Dilo is how loud its footsteps are. A lot of people say it doesn't make sense. Dilo has such loud footsteps. Well, it's very, very simple. If it is a dinosaur that hunts during nighttime, would it not make sense to give it a weakness of the fact that it is easier to hear at nighttime? If you cannot see, visual stimuli becomes less important, but audio stimuli becomes far more important. We have the idea that Dilo is stated to be a strong attacker, but low health, considering its offensive capability. Some people take the statement of fragile Dilo, meaning that it should have less health than even a raptor. I take it as the fact that because there are 8 raptors in a pack, and there are only 4 Dilos in a pack, it means that individually each Dilo is stronger than a raptor when played at nighttime, but it still only has 700 health. Effectively, the Dilo has the ability to output much more damage than a raptor does at a time, but it still has lower health than a dinosaur that naturally does that much damage. For example, a Carno, back when it was 1.8 tons, would be doing similar damage than a Dilo was doing, but of course it has over twice the amount of health. We have the idea that Dilo is primarily scavenging from other dinosaurs or protecting its kill from them during daytime. This is very, very important. We now look at the themes of Dilo, something that is often overlooked. A lot of people use the themes of Dilo to defend the current state that it is in. They say, the hallucinations have to do damage because they represent the venom. And I agree with this. I do. But there's more to that. There's a lot more to that. The venom, in theory, does kill you with damage over time, but that would not be a very engaging system. Some people suggest that Dilo should be made into a DOT attacker, and we have to ask ourselves whether or not we'd actually prefer that. Would you honestly prefer a bunch of Dilos to run up to you and bite you a bunch of times, and then you just slowly die over time without any involvement from the Dilo? We can try to limit this by allowing you to heal off the venom, but the Dilos can just keep attacking you. The idea is that if the Dilos are still attacking you every minute, nothing has actually been improved from the current state of Dilo. This is something to look out for. Once we understand the issues of Dilo, we can actually figure out which reworks are good, and I hope that my rework can live up to your standards, which I'm sure are astronomically high for myself. We have the idea that it's not really an engaging system, so instead we have hallucinations which present a struggle between the prey and the victim. The idea that while your dinosaur's body is fighting against the venom, you quite literally are fighting against these hallucinations. You're fighting against the fear of death itself. This is incredibly thematic. It's such a unique identity for the creature. The Dilo is the Isle's Grim Reaper. And that's such an incredible piece of identity. It needs to be this, at least, competent hunter at nighttime, especially if we limit it to really hunting at night. It needs to have the ability to take down its prey during the limited hours of nighttime and be terrifying while doing so. That is its idea. Dilo is also very thematic regarding the soundscape of the Isle. It isolates your opponent, you get the ambient noise, you have the visual fog. Dilo is meant to create tension with the target. It's a horror experience that you have to try to survive through. Dilo is less about the micro elements of the gameplay, which obviously can be improved, and is a major part of this rework, but instead focuses on the macro feeling of the dinosaur. It's the fear of going out at nighttime and finding a Dilo. The issue, of course, then becomes when Dilos force themselves onto you during the daytime, which I feel like a lot of people have an issue with. At least I have an issue with, even as a Dilo fanboy myself. So how was Dilo changed after its initial conception? Right, because there's no point talking about old Dilo really, but we can talk about new Dilo. So they reduced the Dilo's hallucination recovery cooldown from 5 minutes to 1 minute. This is the time in which you can send out hallucinations. It's every minute. Dilo's swim speed was also improved, and they also eventually fixed the idea of exploiting the AI by being near water. They also allowed the AI to work on other AI, and they then improved the AI's ability to track you and find you. I put a little screenshot at the bottom. Ignore the fact that my name is Chinese. This is an ongoing joke between my friends. You do not need to worry about this. I am just assured that my social credit will remain high. I see that the winds are turning, and I am making the correct plays. What's up, Beijing, for example? I said back when Dilo was going to be nerfed, and I betted that the Dilo venom time would be reduced to 1 minute per envenom. You'd have to reapply it every minute. And Rumpelstiltskin himself, the man, the myth, the legend, said I doubt it would be that much of a reduction. Well, Rumpelstiltskin, who is laughing now? You do not doubt me as the prophet. I am very, very good at understanding what is likely to be changed about a playable, and predicting the issues that a playable will have after it is changed. This is due to my ability to recognize patterns. It is something that I have very, very in common with crows. Crows are very, very good at seeking patterns and finding them, and as am I. In fact, it's very cool. So what did these changes cause? It's a simple question, isn't it? Well, after the initial release of Dilo, and the 5-minute timer to be summoned hallucinations, a lot of people came to the correct conclusion, but with the wrong reasoning. The reasoning was that it was OP, which is also correct, but why is it OP is the question. And so we wanted to have the venom timer reduced, and we got it reduced to 1 minute, in line with Troorodon's venom timer. It's a very, very important thing there. There's a relationship between the venom dinosaurs. If we get another venomous dinosaur like Megalania, we can know for a fact that its venom time will be about 1 minute. Very, very fascinating. So we ended up with a Dilo that had existed in this strange grey zone between being ridiculously oppressive but also completely useless. And it depended on whether or not the AI worked. Hallucinations even worked. Stop saying AI, stop saying clones. We saw the fact that the Dilo could simply just envenom you and then blast you with hallucinations for 5 minutes, which meant that you were more at the whim of the Dilo, or forced to use the unfun bug of camping water, which created a gameplay loop that was unfun for both sides. The community was right about the reasons to nerf the venom timer. As in, they realized that you weren't able to kill the Dilo because it just didn't interact with you, but they failed to find a better solution. And that issue is the interactivity with the dinosaur. When I initially made my Dilo rework back then, I said that the interactivity would be the issue. That the venom timer, while strong, is not the issue. The issue is interactivity. You need to find a way to get the Dilo to attack you, which people have come up with other ideas for. For example, With DOT, people suggest that the Dilo should have to bite the target more and more to apply more DOT. Or you turn the venom into a bleed effect, though I believe the bleed venom is going to be given to Megalania. And the Dilo already has a hallucination power, and it is tied to its identity. So the issue with Dilo mentioned before was the interactivity of his targets, and the target's agency in the fight was not solved and was actually made worse when they removed the ability to remove the hallucinations when they were first summoned. This, once the AI was finally fixed, caused a big spike where every so often a lot of people will play Dilo to take out a large majority of the player base. They will then go back to playing Serrado. So we clearly see here two dinosaurs, Serrado and Dilo, which have an intended gameplay loop, but break out of it. So we need to put them back into line, don't we? So another question is, did the devs even succeed in creating the dinosaur that they wanted? Is the current Dilo we have now what Dilo is meant to be? Well, to be honest, they had some mixed results. We have some successes, and we have some failures, as with any project in the world. Of course, it's not an insult towards the devs. Do not take it as such. Do not even use this comment section to vent about how much you hate the devs. I will not stand for it. I just do not want that sort of community here. I also want a community that thinks about the game and is able to voice their critiques in a professional manner. They did nail the core identity of Dilo. It is a horror creature, but the identity of audio isn't as impactful as I would like, or maybe some other people would not like. Some of you may not even realize the fact that audio was supposed to be a very important part to Dilo's identity. In all of these dev blogs, they always talk about the audio of it. Was so important for them to stress the audio, the soundscape that Dilo has. And as someone who enjoys audio in horror games and ambient sort of soundtracks I like to listen to, Dilo once again piqued my interest with that as well. Not only the fact is it my favorite dinosaur, a dinosaur that I was given a model of when I was a child and still have to this day, one of my first dinosaur toys. I love the dinosaur and I love the Ars dinosaur. Dilo is able to isolate its target. It's also able to summon hallucinations. Dilo did succeed at being a threat during night and has gained a reputation as a strong creature because of it. Players do feel that Dilo is still too tanky and is able to run in and envenom its targets and tank them and then just blast them with hallucinations. I've already said my piece about the Dilo tankiness, but perhaps something could be done. The mechanic behind the hallucinations does not give the target a sense of fear and tension, but instead a feeling of a lame death. The player agency in the target is stripped away from them, which makes a Dilo that is supposed to be you outrunning and outfighting death instead just a slow but steady execution. This is not fun. This is not the identity of the creature. Of course, you may then argue, oh, but Turkish Delight. A carnivore is meant to kill. Correct. But killing in a game like this needs to have some sort of flair, some sort of gravitas. Well, maybe I see the game differently. But I'm looking at what the dev said, and clearly Dilo is supposed to be something else entirely. So starting the rework, we have the first issue that we wanted to get through, which was the Dilo attacks during the day. So the first issue to solve this is the fact that the Dilo was only supposed to be able to summon hallucinations at nighttime. So therefore you make it such that the Dilo cannot summon hallucinations during nighttime. And we have a very, very nice image display here that shows a Dilo stamina bar during daytime and nighttime. This is not the same image, but just graded differently, of course not. And during daytime, there are no charges underneath it. There are no charges underneath it at all. You can see that's the magic of deep levels of Photoshop. And here we see at nighttime, we have charges. Voila. It's a very, very simple rework. This would mean that the Dilo during daytime is now forced to scavenge, or even if they are stocked up on food, they could take the time to find a target that they wish to hunt and stalk them like a creep, like a weirdo. This is something that I enjoy with Dilo, and its relationship with sound, you could say it's some sort of Radiohead, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The second issue that I talked about was Dilo hallucinations currently not having a mechanic to play against them. A simple way to do this would be to simply bring back the original idea. The idea that you could attack the hallucinations before they run at you, and that way, players can deal with them. Slower dinosaurs would struggle with this, so perhaps the time it takes for the hallucination to attack the target could be based on how fast the target is. Or perhaps we can find another mechanic that has been lost to time that would actually fix this issue as well. But slower targets are usually more tanky, so perhaps it's okay for a tanky target to be hit more likely because it has the health to get through it. We'll have to decide. Tanky targets also, on average, do more damage per attack. So if they do land attack on the Dilo, they can scare it away. Ooh, we're starting to think here. Another issue is the interactivity of the Dilo. As I said before, people have suggested bleed or damage over time, but I suggest another answer. I suggest that for the Dilo to regain a charge of its hallucination power, it would need to actually bite the target and regain that charge. This would mean that if you were to blast all 3 charges of your power, you would need to bite the target 3 times in order to get it back. This actually causes a Dilo to interact with the target far more than what we currently have. Making the hallucinations do no damage is effectively this as well, but the hallucinations doing damage, it was key to the Dilo's original concept, so we must pay that in mind and respect the idea. We have the idea that Dilo hallucinations do not have unique factors or spawn types. As we said before, this suffers from dinosaurs like Herrera that can access areas on the map on cliffs and trees. And the Dilo hallucinations can sometimes just spawn on top of the rock and hit you. The devs have stated that they have ideas to add different hallucinations based on where the playable is. So for example, we could have a Dino hallucination in the water, or a Quetz hallucination in the air. I believe it would be fair for these hallucinations, while different, to still do the same 85 damage of the Dilo's bite force. We see the fact that more dynamic hallucinations would be perfectly fine, even if you were less likely to hide from the Dilo. The only issue would then be how you remove these hallucinations from being able to attack you if they are in the air or they are in the water, which can cause more issues, doesn't it? How do we then remove a Quetz hallucination before it attacks? Perhaps the Quetz is... well, if the Quetz is in the air, for example, more than likely you're a flying creature, so you can remove the Quetz. And then once you remove the Quetz, the Dilo runs out of charges and you escape. So that could be a way to escape that completely. As for people on rocks, maybe the Quetz lands on the rock first and then attacks you once it lands. So you could remove it very, very quickly, but we'll have to see, with what the devs decide to do with this. We have the idea that Dilo hallucinations damage is very front-loaded. This is something that a lot of people misunderstand. People often just cry and scream. I'm sorry to insult you, but it's true. That the hallucinations do less damage, as when they are envenomed, they instantly die. Well, we know that with 3 envenomations, and if all 3 hallucinations attack you, you will take a total of 255 damage, as hallucinations count headshots, as far as I know. They just do the flat damage. And furthermore, they're not affected by mutations that buff damage. So this means that even with 1 bite to envenom a raptor and a Paki, and 3 hallucinations, they still have about 150 in the raptor's case, and about 200-ish health for the Paki. But this still does mean that they die within about 30 seconds of the ambush. This is because the Dilo has access to all 3 charges at once. Some people have suggested changes to this, such as the Dilo needing to start with 0 hallucinations or charges and slowly regen all of them. Some people have suggested that the charges should have a very, very long spawn time or work like Cerrado Bile. I disagree with this. I believe there's a simpler solution. There is a simpler solution, but we will get round to that. This is but something to look at. We've understood the idea, we've analysed the idea now, but there can be a better mechanic. One way you could do this simply is that for it to have no charges, and when it envenoms you, it gains 1 charge for each bite, as I said before, and therefore it can quickly get the envenom charges and then start using them. So you can therefore know how many hallucinations a Dilo can summon based on how many bites it did when it was envenoming you. This would add a level of micro gameplay and macro decision making to countering the Dilo. The Dilo hitbox being wonky, we can solve this. It's simple in concept. I understand that programming is far more difficult, but if we could fix the hitbox and reduce the bite speed, it would make Dilo more entertaining to fight for both sides, as we have discussed before. the Dilo's passive hallucinations which can catch players off guard. I personally do not find the Dilo's passive hallucinations to be that fun or engaging. Maybe some other Dilo fans and mains would disagree with me, but I would disagree with them. I do not like the fact that I do not have control of these passive hallucinations. I much prefer being able to work with my hallucination rather than a random hallucination coming out. It can also be annoying for a player who believes that they have escaped the Dilo and can now finally heal, to then be attacked by a passive hallucination that was summoned after they've already exited the 1 minute timer to summon hallucinations. This is a strange inconsistency with the power. It should be changed. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that the passive hallucination should be removed. While some people may say, but you just make Dilo weaker and weaker, I have plans to make it just as strong, do not worry. But I would go as far as to say that in the same way as other dinosaurs in the past have been nerfed for being annoying to face, we do not want the same thing for Dilo. If you are a Dilo main, you have to ask whether or not you like the Dilo because you find it to be a very strong contender, or whether or not you like the idea of the playable. I think a lot of the playables in the game need to have a buff. So, maybe everything needs to have some changes. Dilo has a high speed tier. As I said before, I believe that this is actually integral to the Dilo. It does not hope to catch you out using its agility. In place of agility, it has hallucinations that it needs to work with. Its goal is to run in and run out. And if it is unable to summon hallucinations during daytime, it would have to scavenge and actually be afraid of the other dinosaurs during daytime. That speed would allow it to dart back into the forest. But if it is caught in the open, it does not have the agility to escape a lot of predators, especially fast ones, such as Carno. Even though Carno can struggle with Dilo, you can at least find it easier to land charges on the sneaky little guy. We have Dilo hallucination summoning being too fast for certain playables. We've already discussed this quite a lot of detail earlier on. But we have the idea that hallucinations will also mimic the calls made by the Dilo, and that the Dilo hallucinations do not attack until commanded by the Dilo was an idea that was originally set. We could actually run with this mechanic a little bit, and actually explain the idea of the true rework of Dilo. So we will skim this, but you can still read it to get some spoilers, of course. But now we reach the mechanic. Here is the spoiler. I'm so far calling it the Cool Dilo Rework. The idea that is proposed is a mechanical change to Dilo, and has some potential issues, however I've had the time to iron these out. The main idea of this, while you guys can read how it changes the gameplay, is the fact that when the Dilo summons a hallucination, this hallucination is completely silent. It does not call. The hallucination instead copies your calls. If you 1-call, the hallucination 1-calls. When you 3-call, the hallucination 3-calls at the exact same time as you. Every time you press the button to call, the hallucination also does the call. So it won't be a thing of you call, hallucination calls, otherwise it'll be easy to work out who is who. And when you 3-call, the hallucination runs in and attacks. This means that the Dilo can actually be a bit of a mastermind. They can craft when they use their attacks. They could even summon multiple hallucinations to all attack at the same time, at the cost of needing to regain the hallucinations by biting the targets to regain charges. This is very, very important. This adds a level of micro skill expression to the Dilo, and also adds a macro level of gameplay to the entire thing. When do you use your hallucinations? Why do you use your hallucinations? Could you perhaps get away with using 1 hallucination to land a bite, or would you rather play it easy and use 2 of them? Using 3 could be a great detriment. If you land all 3 hallucinations, maybe they all land, but your opponent is also fighting against you. They now know that UK can remove your hallucinations before they attack by running up and attacking them. We are leaning into the idea that the Dilo represents the venom coursing through your body. While your body is fighting the venom, you are fighting the hallucinations, which represent the venom. And therefore, I believe that you should be able to fight back against the hallucinations before they attack you. This means that the Dilo, while setting up a 3 Dilo attack, could actually end up only doing 2. This means that a more consistent Dilo would instead summon 1 hallucination and make it attack straight away, but this then leads to counterplay. If the dinosaur knows that the hallucination is going to attack straight away, they can instead try going after the Dilo. But in doing so, the Dilo could instead choose to not send out the hallucination attack and run away a little bit to then summon a second hallucination. This means that the Dilo effectively has counterplays and counter to the counterplays. It's a game of wit, it's a game of skill. I also believe that the Dilo should be able to see its hallucinations with a ghostly outline and fill texture, so it can better coordinate with them. Now we go through a little bit of a step-by-step process here. We have step 1, the envenomation. The Tenno is now purple. We have the step 2, which is the summoning. We have the fog circle around the Tenno. We have some ambient noises that are playing. The devs could pick what ambient noises these could be. They could be Dilo chirps and calls. I would love them to be footsteps. Use the fact that a Dilo has heavy footsteps as part of its kit. It can... The ambient noises could mimic a set of maybe 3 to 5 footsteps and then stop. And it's up to the target to actually carefully listen to which footsteps are actually the Dilo's footsteps based on how they are moving, based on the continuousness. But it also means that the Dilo could do the same. It could take 3 steps in the fog and then stop. When summoning the Dilos, they could be either a summon, where the summon of the Dilo is where the Dilo was when it summoned it, or what we have now, which is the random summons. Both of them have their upsides, both of them have their downsides. I think they both could offer some unique gameplay. We have the third step, which is the attacking. The Dilo 3 calls, and as it 3 calls, the AI 3 calls at the same time, and they both attack the target. The Dilo lands a bite on our poor helpless Tenno, and regains the charge that it used to summon that hallucination. I would obviously allow for a level of passive hallucination gain or charge gain. I'd make it 3 times slower as it is now. Instead of a hallucination every 10 seconds, it would be a charge every 30 seconds. This would mean that to do a guaranteed hit on the target with 2 hallucinations, you would need to wait a full minute, in which case you would need to attack the target anyways. The idea that if the target is being defended by its friends, you are going to want to try to use the hallucinations and try and slip in and land a bite while avoiding that protection that is being given. We now have the issues and successes with the cool Dilo rework. We have a lot of issues with this, of course, that could potentially happen. The biggest fear, of course, would be the fact that Dilo would be a lot weaker, but I believe that the Dilo, similar to Raptor, if given more tools with which to attack and coordinate its attacks, would actually end up being just as strong. But this time it has a lot of counterplay, as I said. It'll be up to the players to actually figure out the counterplay, and it would instead be a battle of wits, not a battle of mechanical skill like with Raptor. See how I'm very careful to say mechanical skill instead of skill, because they have different words, different meanings. It is about the decision making. It is about the macro gameplay, how you play against this. It is a battle of attrition in a sense. Not with bleed or damage like Raptor, but instead it is a battle of attrition for the Dilo to set up its armies and keep getting charges to summon hallucinations. In fact, this could lead to some pretty wacky strategies in which the Dilo summons 3 hallucinations, but manages to go in and land another bite on the target and summon a 4th hallucination. This could be very, very dangerous. And then the Dilo could summon and get all of them to attack at the same time. This is very, very interesting. If the Dilo can summon the hallucination if the Dilo is able to summon the hallucination where it was when it summoned it, I think this could be a very, very interesting piece of gameplay. Because that means that the target knows where the hallucination is, even without the hallucination calling, because you can listen to where the Dilo was when it made the noise of summoning. However, if you go to stop the hallucination and attack it before the Dilo 3 calls, you could end up being jumped by the Dilo. Or even better, this could actually force the Dilo to have to 3 call immediately. This is what I mean by solving the issue of the front-loaded nature of Dilo's damage in more creative ways. By making the Dilo have to second guess whether or not it's 3 calls straight away or tries to be greedy, this means that the damage comes out later. Instead of dying in 30 seconds, you are spending 30 seconds trying to see if you can prevent that damage from happening. You are trying to outsmart the Dilo, you are trying to sabotage the Dilo's plans. If the Dilo decides to summon 1 hallucination and get it to 3 calls straight away and attack you, it has a 50-50 chance of being the Dilo that is attacked, because there are 2 targets coming towards you. If only 1 target comes towards you, you know it's a hallucination. You won't be able to dodge it, unfortunately. It will attack you, because the chance to dodge the hallucination That's micro gameplay. We are focusing more on the macro gameplay, the overall attrition. Yeah, the micro gameplay is when you choose to do all these little things. We have the fact that the Dilo could even see you running towards the hallucination and then summon 2 more hallucinations. It could even hide the hallucinations in bushes, or even run further away from you to summon a hallucination before running back, at the cost of you listening to the Dilo run away and then you yourself escaping. There's so much that can be done with this variation of Dilo. It solves a lot of the issues. We don't need to worry about slower dinosaurs not being able to go against the Dilo, because it can hear the Dilo when it summons them, and the summoned Dilo is on top of where the Dilo was when it was summoning. So you can head towards it, you can force the Dilo's hand early, and in forcing the Dilo's hand, you create a 50-50 situation. The Dilo could even 3-call and then just start summoning again. This is the idea, but in summoning again, it will run out of charges, meaning it will be forced to bite you. So if the Dilo does not go in for the first run in, you know it has to go in for the second one. Or if not the second one, then it has to go in for the third. These are all of the decisions that are being made. And this is only done because the Dilo now has to command the hallucinations to attack. This also means that the Dilo now has a more intensive relationship with noise, with its calls, what the devs wanted. It means that the Dilo is now a more interesting and engaging fight. Some people will still dislike this fight, but if you dislike the fight because of just hallucinations attacking you, and you wanted the Dilo to be a more intensive and a dinosaur that allows you to express yourself and your understanding of the playable, this is my solution. There are now ways to counter the hallucinations, a way to counter the Dilo. This is a very, very interesting rework, and it simply uses an idea that the devs had to begin with. But does this Dilo do what the devs wanted? So on the side, we have the criteria that the devs set. The Dilo in this rework is a nighttime hunter, as the hallucinations only work at nighttime. The Dilo is able to confuse the target with audio, with the passive audio, perhaps even footprints that play in the fog, and the hallucinations. The hallucinations deal damage. The hallucinations attack when the Dilo calls. The hallucination is now more tied to sound, and it calls, and when you call, the hallucinations call at the same time. So you could even do a 1-call and have all of the hallucinations 1-call and really confuse the target. This does, however, mean that against a group of Dilos, it would be a very, very oppressive thing. But this would not change no matter what you reworked about Dilo. If you made it Venom or you made it Bleed based, and you have 4 Dilos versus 1 Tenno, obviously it's going to be a very, very difficult fight for the Tenno. Nothing's going to change this. This is like saying that a Tenno versus 8 Raptors is an unfair fight. Of course it is, you are outnumbered. It is like saying that a solo Cerrado versus 3 Carnos might be an unfair fight for the Cerrado, or even 2 Carnos versus 2 Dilos is an unfair fight for the Dilos. Numbers matter. We cannot judge a playable based on its numbers being used effectively, can we? So Dilo has the potential to be a strong attacker while maintaining the fragility, as its health has not changed, but the chance of it being attacked has increased, which over the course of the fight will lead to the Dilo being more likely to be hit by an attack, which in turn makes the Dilo feel more fragile. The more chances you have to attack the Dilo means the more chances you have to land that attack on the Dilo, and in landing that attack on the Dilo, you may even do enough damage to scare it off and not want to risk going in again to kill you. This Dilo is also able to isolate targets using the fog and the ambient noises. Further considerations for the rework for Dilo. The further considerations would be where the hallucinations spawn, as we have discussed, and whether or not we decide to engage with certain mechanics like I have suggested, or we keep it simple. I for one believe that having the Dilo hallucinations spawn where you called them is a much better solution for the Dilo, but I am perfectly fine for the consideration to be made that we keep it random. But however, if we keep them random, we need to remember the fact that against faster dinosaurs, they will just counter the hallucinations, but they also have less health. But if the Dilo is unable to land a bite without also being hit itself, people will therefore want them to increase its agility again, which we do not want for Dilo. It's designed like this for a reason. We want to maintain the identity of the dinosaur. It's very, very important. And that effectively is the end of this PowerPoint. We have gone through, in this short little lesson and rework discussion, what Dilo is, what it is meant to be, how we have succeeded and failed the Dilo, the annoyances and issues that Dilo has. We've even discussed my rework for the Dilo, and I've tried to make a convincing argument as to why this fixes the issues. This rework does not gut the Dilo. We have seen what has happened with the Kano rework, and now 6 months, approaching a year later, people are now crying that Kano is too weak. We have seen what happened with Maya, where we decided to buff a part of Maya's kit that was not the strength of its kit, and we now see how strong Maya is. We even have examples with Serrado. Serrado was originally designed not even as a brawler, it was originally designed to be a dinosaur that ran away from things. It was then designed to be a dinosaur that had the raw damage to actually go against Kano. You see, it was a dinosaur that was designed to have its bile to make you scared. Its ult bite was purposely slow, due to the fact that the devs wanted Serrados to not rely on the ult bite, but instead reposition themselves manually and actually try to run away from certain targets that are coming after them. And we've seen how all of these small changes towards Serrado have now turned it into a very oppressive dinosaur. We really want the same things to happen to Dilo. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I, for one, don't. I don't like it when any dinosaur in this game is gutted. I think it's very, very unfair to the people who like that dinosaur, even if it has problems. This is the same for Stego, when Stego was a problem. It has been changed to be a much more interesting dinosaur. This was the same for Dibble, before Dibble received nerfed. I did not want Dibble to be gutted, and thankfully Dibble necessarily was not gutted. I do not want this. I think it is very, very counterintuitive for the community to wish death upon a playable and to insult other people based on their choice of playable. The whole arguments, as I said before, of skill are meaningless to me. If someone says, that playable is not skillful, I don't care. Oh, but Turkish Delight, you've said in the past that you dislike camping. I do. I dislike hard camping. I wish that we had tools to perhaps force someone out of camping. Maybe even a mechanic tied to stress, where when you are surrounded while camped, maybe your water and hunger drain faster. Who knows, right? I prefer the game to be more engaging, but I also understand the importance of camping. If you are a Dibble, having a fight against 3 raptors, these 3 raptors are equal to less than half of your weight, nearly a third of your weight. Why should the raptors expect you to exert all your effort to take them down when you could just waste their time and get them to leave? Especially as against dinosaurs like Aloe, and eventually the other mid-tiers that we will get, Dibble will not be able to just simply camp versus them. The same thing for dinosaurs like Stego and Trike. Potentially they will not be able to camp versus the other apex carnivores. But I strongly believe that the apex carnivores are going to be centered more around ambushing the other apexes, given the fact that the apex herbivores are very, very front-loaded in their damage. Trike's damage could be improved though, just a personal FYI. But we see that there is a lot to this game. The game is more than just who can press WASD in the more elaborate way. There are macro game design decisions, there are themes for the dinosaurs, there are things they are supposed to represent, threats that they are supposed to be. Both carnivore and herbivore, there are supposed to be threats. They're supposed to make you think about what you're doing in this game. That is what a hardcore survival game is. It puts the impetus onto your decision making onto you, the player, to explore this environment. And unlike other survival games, this game puts the horror factor clearly in the hands of the player. As much as you can be made to feel fear and terror from another player, you can do the same to another player. This is important. This is a very, very crucial part of the game. And Dilo being a dinosaur that represents fear, in a community that misses the way that Legacy felt and the vibe and the ambience of Legacy, I believe that we are ironically actually moving further away from Legacy with ideas like this to gut playables, to reduce the risks, to reduce the scariness, to make everything just a cuddly toy version of what it used to be in order to satisfy the ability of those who are not as confident with the game. I believe there is a learning curve for this game. I believe that hopefully with UI changes, the devs are able to achieve their dream of properly communicating with the players. I understand why the devs have not done this, given the fact that the game is constantly changing. So it would be a waste of time to constantly have to update something on every single little change, but as a community we can make good changes. If what Kiss and Kitten said at the start really did mean that we as a community have a lot of influence over how things are developed, and not just the fact that we have a big influence on how the game is played, then why not use this influence for good instead of shunning each other, instead of insulting each other? I saw just the other day a post criticizing Raptor players, saying that it's a skillless dinosaur. To an extent, everything in the game is skillless. If you ask good players of this game why they are so good at the game, they will probably tell you something that it's an easy game, it's rather simple. There's a lot of things we need to consider. We can make this game a much better game. I do not blame the devs for not listening to a lot of the community feedback. When people will write a post saying nerf Dilo with no idea for a rework, with no consideration over the player base, could they simply have animosity for the player base? It does not matter. Players simply wish to have fun. You cannot criticize someone for wanting to have fun by playing the strongest dinosaur and killing everything if you yourself are also the same. However, this does not mean that you have the moral grandstanding to say that, well, I like playing Dryo, so I'm not the problem. Well, if you engage in the same behaviors, in my opinion, you are the problem as well. We need to support each other in this community. We're not a big community. We need to be friendly with each other. We need to work together. We need to aim to make the game fun for everyone. And I hope that this video has detailed a way in which you can consider these reworks and actually consider how to rework things to be better than what they were to begin with. I will end with a closing note, a far more personal closing note. Yes, indeed. I, of course, have not been making videos because I've been looking for a job after I left my previous job. I had my health issues with my stomach and my gastric issues, as disgusting as that is. They still do plague me, but I've learnt to deal with them much better. Finding a job is very, very difficult, and I have struggled with that. It's been very, very tough. I understand that quite a lot of you will be studying for exams. I understand a lot of you will be even on summer break. Some of you may still be in university or at work, working a job, or even looking for a job. And those people, my heart goes out to you. It really does. I hope that you find the success that you are looking for. While I can be a very unlikable person, while I can be very rude and very crass, I've even taken a lot of time to not say as many rude words during this video, as I want it to be more professional. As some of you know how much I love saying rude words, how much I love insulting people, how much that I'm almost a pseudo-toxic personality. I'm also able to look at the behaviors of other people and myself and reflect upon them. My positions on things like camping have become more relaxed as the year has gone on. I understand its importance in the game. I understand why people do it. I realise the importance not in punishing someone who camps, for example, but instead offering them alternatives instead of camping, by making them feel more confident to play the dinosaur in a different way. You know? It's all about understanding each other, really. Which I think is a very, very powerful message, of course. So with that, I will leave you guys. I wish you the best. And as always, I don't know why you're watching me to begin with, so you can all fuck off now and do something productive with your lives, you lazy sons of bitches.